So in this session, we are going to talk about data type in C programming language. So first of all, we'll talk about data type in general idea, and then we'll try to get into the aspect of C programming language. So whenever I say the word data, so it means that anything that can be recorded digitally is considered as data. So it can be number, character, text, right? Again, your text consists of characters itself. Then we have audio, image, and video. Now, this is something that we are not going to discuss in this C programming course. Our maximum focus will remain around numbers, characters, text, string, and so on. Right now, so every variable that you write, it must have a data type in C programming language, right? So it indicates, so the data type indicates what type of values the variable can hold. That's the simple idea about data type. Now, so if I talk about the in general idea of data type, so it's a terminology in the domain of computer science. It refers to the kind of data that might appear in any kind of computation, right? So you can observe here, these are some of the examples like 34. This is a numeric data, a number. In specific, this is a decimal integer, right? Next, this one is the data type date. Then this is alphanumeric data, right? This is some sort of graphics. Then this is the word Pascal. It consists of characters. So collection of characters or sequence of characters, we call it string. Then if you observe this one is called as image, right? And this comma separated list of integers, we are calling it array of integers. So you can observe here, some of the data types are composite, some are primitives, right? So you can compare it like atoms and molecules. So atoms combine to form molecules. So like this 34, you can consider this is atomic data which cannot be decomposed further. But if you observe this comma separated values, this can be decomposed further into individual numbers. So here we have real type, boolean data type, char, complex numbers in the form of 3 plus 4 iota, where iota is square root of -1. So these are some of the more frequently used data types, right? So that's the in general idea about data type. So the data type of an object determines the set of values it can have and what operations can be performed on it, because based on the data only we can say that what operations can be done, right? Now variables and constants are something that we have already discussed. Here our discussion will be mostly around the word data type, right? So with regard to C programming language, so I can say data type of an object. Now here this word object is there. What does it mean? I'll talk about it. So but briefly I can state that anything that is allocated memory during the runtime is considered as object in C, right? It's very different from the notion of what we use in object oriented programming paradigm, right? So object with regard to C programming language, it means that anything that is allocated memory, that's the object actually. So the type of the object determines the set of values. So basically, if I talk about variables in mathematics, variables can take value from its domain. If I say simply x, so I don't know what it can take, right? So in that case, if I'm writing an equation such as x plus 1 equal to 0, so in that case I have to mention the domain actually. So that domain is the set of values or set of acceptable values, and what operations can be done. So that is also said by data type again. Now what is the need of data type? Of course, to represent data. So every programming language needs a variety of data types, and even in C programming language we are having the set of data types which are more than sufficient to handle text or numbers for computations, right? Now here I'll talk about this primitive data type. Just now I gave a basic idea that something that is atomic, that's primitive actually, right? Now every CPU or every microprocessor can operate on a small set of primitive data types. So the CPU instruction set and its hardware can process these data, right, directly. So this finite subset of integers are processed in the ALU, that is the arithmetic logic unit, right? And for handling the fractional data, we have FPO hardware, right? That is the floating point unit which handles floating point operations. Now what are primitives exactly? So these types, the primitive types, are supported directly by the hardware of the machine, right? And it cannot be defined in terms of other types. So it's like atomic in nature, you cannot decompose it further. On top of using these primitives, you can have compound types or derived types, but primitive is something that you cannot you cannot decompose this, right? That's the idea of primitives. So the typical primitives are boolean, character, integer types, fixed point types, and floating point types. Like if I talk about C programming language, we have the char data type for character. For integral type we have integer, And for integer, again, we are having size specifiers like long integer, short integer, simply as integer 4 byte, right? For fixed point, we do not have a data type directly. For floating point types, we are having float, right, double, long double, and so on. Now, about derived data type, it is something that I will be discussing later with regard to C programming language. Just the idea that you can compare it with the molecule, actually, that combining primitives we can have derived data types. So with regard to C programming language, these are the derived data types, that is arrays, functions, right, pointers, structures, unions, right? So this I have taken from the classic textbook of C language, that is the K&R C book, right? So these are the derived data type according to K&R literature: arrays, functions, pointers, structures, union. Now do not worry about this, because in the upcoming discussions we'll be talking about this thing in extensive details. Now, as I have given you basic idea regarding object, so with regard to K&R book, I would just want to show that when they use this word object, what do they exactly mean? So object is something, it is a named region of a storage. That means if I talk about the memory, when the memory is allocated for a program, right? So whatever named region is there for a variable or for an array or whatever data type, let's say, so the named region of storage in memory is called as object. So whenever in the world of C programming language I use this word object, that means I'm referring to some region of storage where it has been given some named, and this name is nothing but my identifier. This region of storage is identified by my identifier. So it is also called as L value of an expression. Now what is this L value? So consider this example. If you observe here, integer x assignment 42. So here this x is the L value. For example, if I write here, let's say integer x assignment 42, 45, let's say, and I can print out this data, right? Percentage d slash n and here x. So this will print 45. So I'll just compile and execute this one. This will print 45. But if I try to do something like this, let's say I'm writing some number here and then I'm writing x. So it is saying that pick up the value x and store it in 78. Now 78 may not be a valid storage location. So if I try to compile this, you can get an error here, that is the L value required as a left operand of the assignment. That means in the left side of this assignment, there must be L value and this must be a valid object. Valid object means it should be a named region of the storage. So that's the idea of object in C programming language. Now these are the few basic data types which we are having in C. So char, int, float, double. So these are the basic data types that we are having in C programming language. And for integer, we can have various sizes of integer based on the specifiers, that is short integer, normal integer, int as it is, and then we are having the long integer. So integer, it reflects the natural size of integers. Anyways, about each of these data types we'll discuss in more detail, but let me tell you, in 64-bit systems, the size of character is 1 byte, size of float is 4 byte, size of double is 8 bytes, size of long double is 16 bytes. And for integer, the natural size of integer on host machine nowadays, which we are using as of now, that is your 32 bits, or we can also say 4 bytes. Short integer 2 bytes and long integer 4 bytes. So these data types we'll be studying, we'll be covering them extensively in our upcoming discussion. So that's the basic idea of data types in C language.